Chapter 4 is titled, An Amazing Child. This is the intro. Was written by my father subsequently after being inspired by the story in Luke when Jesus remained behind as his parents returned home. In this story, it is made clear that Jesus is aware of his life's purpose, and he is aware of what he is to do with his time on earth. I think that God has a purpose for each one of us. Our life's purpose is by its very nature divine. God has designed us with a perfectly optimized plan for our lives. The better our relationship is with God, the better we will be able to discover the intended plan He has for us, and the easier it will be for us to achieve the life He has planned for us. Discovering life's purpose seems quite simple, and for some individuals, this discovery comes very early in life. Jesus knew by the age of 12 what his purpose was. Mozart was only a child when he composed his first piano sonata, and then spent the rest of his life writing some of the greatest music in history. For me, answering this question has been an ongoing process. When I was a kid, I was absolutely certain that my destiny was to be a professional hockey player. This, of course, was because I had meticulously studied every aspect of the game, the rules and regulations, the defensive and offensive strategies, and the secret moves that only the best players could pull off. All of this was done by repeatedly, day after day, watching the Mighty Ducks trilogy. I was convinced, with absolute certainty, that if I watched those movies enough, I would learn all of the necessary skills required to become an Olympic hockey player. I was also convinced that God's way of communicating to me that it was His will for me to become an Olympic hockey player by having the creators of the Mighty Duck make that movie. I was so grateful for this understanding and knew that I would have to put in the work to get there. I spent countless hours practicing my skills, skating outside every day with my hockey stick and neon orange street hockey ball. I would practice the slap shot and wrist shot. I would practice dribbling the ball without looking at the ground as I skated forward. And I continued to practice every day, honing my skills as a hockey player, until one day I saw the movie Apollo 13, and I realized that it was not God's plan for me to be a hockey player after all, but that it was God's will for me to be an astronaut. I was so excited to know that God had been planning for me to travel into space, and I was going to do whatever it took to get me there. Everything was going great, until the day I stepped into Algebra 2. Now I knew beforehand that in order to be an astronaut one needed to be skilled in the area of mathematics, so I knew that this class was going to be required for me to continue on into the stars. What I did not know was I was going to fail that class harder than anything I had ever failed before, even worse than 7th grade geography. It was embarrassing, and I could not believe that my Algebra 2 teacher, in collaboration with the Rutherford County school system, was working to hinder God's plan for my life. Didn't they know that I was destined to be exploring the cosmos, making all kinds of wonderful and exciting discoveries? If they failed me in this class, how was I supposed to continue on the path God had laid out before me, in the form of a major motion picture? Having my hopes of becoming an astronaut destroyed with the failing of that class, I was lost. How could I have misunderstood God's plan for me so greatly? Now I was completely willing to admit that it may have been my overactive imagination that had led me to believe that my destiny was to be an Olympic hockey player. But I knew that God was speaking to me when I saw Tom Hanks and the rest of the crew launch into the unknown. As I watched the scene when the crew had to do the calculations to resolve the impending doom, I knew that it was God's divine wisdom which was leading me towards my inevitable future as an astronaut. Looking back on all of that, it seems like I simply misinterpreted God's message, which was probably more like, look out for Algebra 2, it's going to be a doozy, or whatever you do, don't pick anything that involves math. Understanding our life's purpose seems straightforward enough. In theory, nobody understands us better than ourselves, and determining what it is that we are to do with our lives should be easy. Yet very often, knowing with absolute certainty what our destiny is, or what we were put here to do, can elude us. And the simple fact is that when I was a kid, I had no idea what God had in store for me, because I never bothered to ask. I just assumed that because I felt such an intense sense of excitement for watching a successful knuckle puck attempt, it was that feeling that was God's way of communicating to me His will. But you know what they say about assuming. If I had been mature enough in my relationship with God, I would have known that all I had to do was ask Him to reveal to me what it was that He had planned for my life, and He would have directed me.